17 soldiers. Pinned down in a kill zone. Command had already written them off. The radio crackled one last time, "Fall back." They're gone. But 3,000 meters away, through a scope that revealed everything, a young sniper saw something Command didn't, a chance. What she did next would shatter every rule in the book and rewrite the meaning of courage. This is the story of Ivy Harris, the soldier who chose loyalty over orders, and turned certain death into legendary survival. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from. If you're enjoying this, don't miss out, subscribe now for more. The morning sun hung lazily over the European countryside, casting long golden shadows across the forward operating base nestled in the valley. It was the kind of peaceful, ordinary day that felt almost offensive given where they were, deep in hostile territory, where peace was just the silence between storms. Ivy Harris sat cross-legged on the concrete barriers outside the armory, methodically cleaning her rifle. The Barrett M82 lay disassembled before her like a puzzle she'd solved 1,000 times. Each piece gleamed under her practiced hands, hands that were surprisingly small for someone who wielded such devastating firepower. At 24, Ivy didn't look like the kind of person who could drop a target from over a mile away. She was petite, almost delicate, with auburn hair pulled back in a regulation bun that never quite stayed tight, and green eyes that held an intensity that made even hardened soldiers look away. "Harris. You coming to the briefing or planning to marry that rifle?" Corporal Danny Wade called from across the yard, his Irish accent thick as morning fog. Ivy didn't look up. "Already married to it. We're very happy together." Wade laughed, but it died quickly. Everyone at Firebase Kodiak knew Ivy's story, even if they pretended not to. She'd been a competitive shooter back in Prague before everything changed. Before her younger brother, a journalist, was killed by militia forces while covering refugee movements. Before she'd walked into a recruitment office with tears still wet on her cheeks and a fire in her chest that wouldn't go out. That was 3 years ago. Now, she was one of the best designated marksmen in the European Expeditionary Force, though you wouldn't know it from how Command treated her. While other snipers got the glory assignments, the high-value target eliminations, the daring reconnaissance missions, Ivy got stuck with perimeter security and equipment checks. Professional. Competent. But always kept at arm's length. She reassembled her rifle with practiced efficiency and headed toward the operations center. The briefing room was already packed with bodies in tension. Captain Reeves stood at the front, a map of the northern sector spread across the digital display. He was career military, the kind of officer who saw soldiers as chess pieces and mission success as the only metric that mattered. "Listen up," Reeves barked, silencing the murmur of conversation. "We've got actionable intelligence on a supply convoy moving through the Kravok Pass. 17 Rangers from Alpha Company will insert at dawn tomorrow for interdiction and intel gathering. It's a clean op, in and out before the enemy knows what hit them." Ivy leaned against the back wall, studying the map. The Kravok Pass was a narrow valley flanked by steep ridges. Tactically speaking, it was a nightmare. Limited egress routes, high ground on both sides, and if the enemy had any sense, they'd have overlooked positions fortified for exactly this kind of scenario. "What about Overwatch?" someone asked. Reeves shook his head. "This is a rapid deployment. We're keeping it light and fast. The Rangers can handle themselves." Ivy's jaw tightened. No Overwatch. It was asking for trouble, and everyone in the room with any tactical sense knew it. But this wasn't her operation. She was here for awareness, nothing more. As the briefing continued, she found herself memorizing the map despite herself. The insertion point, the rally points, the extraction coordinates. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a voice whispered that something was wrong. She'd learned to trust that voice, it had kept her alive through a dozen close calls. After the briefing, she caught Lieutenant Garcia in the hallway. He was one of the few officers who treated her like an actual soldier rather than a liability. "Sir, that operation." "I know," Garcia cut her off, voice low. "But it's not our call. Command wants results, and they want them fast." Politics. Politics get people killed. Garcia's expression softened with something that looked like sympathy. Not all of us see what you see, Harris. But yeah, sometimes they do. That night, Ivy couldn't sleep. She lay in her rack, staring at the ceiling while her roommate, tech specialist Yuki Nakamura, snored softly across the room. The mission details turned over and over in her mind. Something about the intelligence felt off, too convenient, too clean. And the choice to go in without sniper support was either arrogant or ignorant, and she couldn't decide which was worse. At 0400, she gave up on sleep and headed to the rec room. The coffee was terrible, but it was hot and caffeinated, which was all that mattered. She found Wade already there, hunched over a tactical manual. Couldn't sleep either, he asked. Bad feeling about tomorrow. Wade nodded slowly. Alpha Company's good. Best we've got. Being good doesn't matter if you're walking into a trap. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Wade didn't argue, which somehow made it worse. By 0530, the base was alive with pre-mission activity. Ivy watched from her usual position on the barriers as Alpha Company loaded into the transport vehicles. 17 Rangers, young and professional, checking equipment with the focused intensity of soldiers who knew the stakes. Their leader, Staff Sergeant Cole Brightman, was a veteran with 2 combat tours and a reputation for bringing his people home. If anyone could navigate the Kravok Pass, it was him. But as the convoy rolled out through the gates, Ivy felt that whisper of wrongness grow into a shout. She gripped her coffee cup so hard it cracked. You okay? Yuki had appeared beside her, always perceptive. No, Ivy said honestly. I don't think I am. The sun climbed higher, indifferent and warm. Somewhere to the north, 17 soldiers were driving toward a pass that felt more like a grave with every passing moment. And Ivy Harris, the sniper they never put on missions, couldn't shake the certainty that before this sunny, normal day was over, everything was going to go catastrophically wrong. The morning crawled by with excruciating slowness. Ivy tried to distract herself with routine, weapons maintenance, physical training, anything to quiet the gnawing anxiety in her gut. But every 15 minutes, she found herself checking the operations board, looking for updates on Alpha Company's progress. By 1100 hours, they should have been in position. By 1130, they should have made first contact with the convoy. The board showed green across all checkpoints. Mission proceeding as planned. Ivy didn't believe it for a second. She was in the armory, ostensibly organizing ammunition counts, when the first indication of trouble crackled through the base-wide communication system. It wasn't an official alert, just a subtle change in radio chatter, a tightness in voices that made her freeze mid-count. Alpha Company, respond. Contact, heavy contact. Need immediate support, we're pinned. The voices overlapped, fractured by distance and interference, but the message was crystal clear: Alpha Company was in trouble. Ivy dropped what she was doing and sprinted toward the operations center. By the time she burst through the doors, the room was in controlled chaos. Officers clustered around communication stations, their faces grim. The large display showed the tactical map of Kravok Pass, and what she saw made her blood run cold. Alpha Company's position markers were stationary, clustered in the narrowest section of the pass. Around them, enemy contact indicators bloomed like poison flowers, at least 40 hostiles, maybe more, positioned on the high ground on both sides. It was a classic ambush, and by the look of things, it had been planned for exactly this scenario. Get me drone coverage. Captain Reeves shouted. Negative, sir, a specialist responded. Weather front moved in. We're getting heavy interference. Then get me air support. Closest strike package is 40 minutes out. By the time they're on station. I know what it means. Reeves slammed his fist on the console. The room fell silent except for the desperate radio calls from Alpha Company. 3 wounded, need medevac. RPG, RPG, get down. Running low on ammunition. Ivy pushed forward until she could see the map clearly. The Rangers had taken cover in a dried riverbed that offered minimal protection. Enemy forces held the high ground and were systematically cutting them to pieces. Without air support or artillery, which they couldn't use without risking the Rangers themselves in that terrain, Alpha Company was trapped in a kill zone with no way out. "Sir," Lieutenant Garcia was saying, his voice tight, "we need to send a relief force." Reeves shook his head, his face ashen. "By the time we mobilize and reach that position, it'll be over. The nearest ground forces are 2 hours away." "So what are you saying?" Garcia demanded. The silence that followed was answer enough. Ivy felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. They were going to abandon them. 17 soldiers, good soldiers, left to die because the tactical situation was unfavorable. "We wait for air support," Reeves finally said, his voice hollow. "That's all we can do." 40 minutes, someone whispered. "They don't have 40 minutes. Ivy's mind was racing, calculating. The Kravok Pass was approximately 8 kilometers from the base, too far for most weapons systems. But not for all of them. She knew every elevation point, every ridge and depression between here and there. She'd studied that terrain obsessively the night before, unable to shake her premonition. And she knew something else. There was an observation post 3 kilometers north of the base, on a ridge that offered direct line of sight into the northern approaches. From that position, with the right equipment and shooter, you could reach into the Kravok Pass. It would be an extreme long-range shot, pushing the absolute limits of what was possible. But it was theoretically feasible. "Sir," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. Reeves turned, seeming to notice her for the first time. "Harris? What are you doing here?" "I can help them. Unless you can teleport a platoon into that pass, I don't see how." "The northern observation post. From that elevation, I can provide overwatch. Suppress the enemy positions, give Alpha Company room to maneuver." Reeves stared at her like she'd suggested flying there on a magic carpet. "That's over 3,000 meters. Invariable wind. Against moving targets on broken terrain. I'm aware of the challenges, sir." "It's impossible." "It's a chance," Garcia interjected. "Which is more than they have now." Reeves looked between them, then back at the map where Alpha Company's markers were starting to blink, casualty indicators. More wounded. Possibly dead. The radio calls were becoming more desperate, more fragmented. "Can't hold this position. Sergeant Brightman is hit. Please, we need help." Something shifted in Reeves' expression. Not hope, he was too experienced for that, but perhaps the recognition that doing nothing was its own kind of failure. "Even if I authorized it," he said slowly, "you'd need specialized equipment. The Barrett doesn't have the effective range for." "The Chaitak M200, Ivy interrupted. "We have 2 in the special weapons locker. For .08 caliber, effective range beyond 2,500 meters. In optimal conditions, it's been used successfully beyond 3,000. This isn't optimal conditions." "No sir, it's not. But it's what we have." Reeves looked at her, really looked at her, for perhaps the first time since she'd arrived at Firebase Kodiak. She met his gaze steadily, letting him see the absolute certainty in her eyes. This wasn't bravado or heroics. It was mathematics and skill and desperation combined into something that might, just might, be enough. "You'll be disobeying direct tactical doctrine," he said quietly. "If this fails, if you take that shot and miss, if you give away your position and accomplish nothing, it'll be your career. Respectfully, sir, I don't give a damn about my career. 17 Rangers are dying right now. We've invested considerable effort in bringing you this story. If you find it engaging, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. Now, let's return to the narrative." The silence in the operations center stretched like a wire pulled too tight. Captain Reeves' jaw worked as he processed Ivy's words, the weight of command visible in every line of his face. Around them, the desperate radio calls from Alpha Company continued, a countdown to catastrophe. "Garcia," Reeves finally said, his voice rough. "Get her the Chaitak and whatever ammunition we have. Fast." Ivy didn't wait for him to change his mind. She was already moving, Garcia right behind her. They sprinted across the compound to the armory, where the special weapons locker required 2 separate keys and a combination. Garcia's hands shook slightly as he worked the lock. "You really think you can make this shot?" he asked as the heavy door swung open. "I have to." The Chatak M200 was a work of art and engineering, sleek, precise, and intimidating. Ivy had qualified on it once, 2 years ago, but had never been authorized to use it in the field. She lifted it carefully, feeling its weight, its balance. Heavier than her Barrett, but steadier too. Built for exactly this kind of impossible shot. Ammunition? Garcia was already pulling boxes. .408 caliber, match grade. "We've got maybe 60 rounds total." "I'll take 40. More than that, I won't be able to carry effectively." They loaded the ammunition into a tactical pack along with a rangefinder, wind meter, and portable ballistic computer. Every second counted, but rushing would be fatal. Ivy forced herself to be methodical, checking each piece of equipment twice. Wade appeared in the doorway, breathing hard. "I'm coming with you." "Spotter." "Danny, you don't have to." "Shut up, Harris. You'll need someone to call when and watch your back." He grabbed a rifle and spare magazines. "Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't do anything completely insane." "Too late for that," Garcia muttered, but he was already moving to requisition a vehicle. 5 minutes later, Ivy and Wade were in a light tactical vehicle, racing north from the base. The sunny day that had seemed so peaceful that morning now felt like mockery, beautiful weather while good soldiers died. Ivy gripped the Chatak, running calculations in her head. Distance, elevation, wind speed, temperature, barometric pressure. Each variable was a potential point of failure. The observation post was a fortified position on a ridge overlooking the valley. It had been abandoned for 3 weeks, deemed unnecessary after the front line shifted. Now it was their only hope. The vehicle bounced over rough terrain, every jolt a potential disaster for the sensitive equipment. "Radio check," Wade said, adjusting his headset. "OP North, this is Kodiak 7, how copy?" Static. Then Garcia's voice, "Kodiak 7, solid copy. Alpha Company's situation is critical. Multiple casualties. Enemy is closing in for final assault." Ivy's foot pressed harder on the accelerator. They crested the final rise, and the observation post came into view, a concrete bunker with firing positions cut into the stone. She brought the vehicle to a skidding stop, and they were out and moving before the dust settled. The OP offered a commanding view of the valley below. In the distance, perhaps 3.5 kilometers away, she could see the Kravok Pass. Even without optics, smoke was visible rising from the ambush site. Through the scope, it would be like looking into hell itself. Wade set up the spotting scope while Ivy prepared her firing position. The Chatak went onto its bipod, oriented toward the pass. She settled behind it, feeling the familiar cold focus descend, the state of mind where emotion disappeared and only data remained. "Range," Wade called. I pressed to the scope. 3,200 meters. Wind, left to right, 8 to 12 kilometers per hour, variable. Temperature 22 degrees, dropping. Ivy adjusted the scope, dialing in the calculated drop. At this distance, she wasn't just fighting physics, she was negotiating with it. The bullet would drop nearly 30 meters over that distance. Wind could push it several meters left or right. And she'd be shooting at targets that might not even be visible to the naked eye. "Talk to me, Garcia," she said into her radio. "What's the situation?" The response made her blood run cold. "Alpha Company has 5 confirmed Kia, 9 wounded. They're out of smoke grenades and down to less than 30% ammunition. Enemy is massing for a final push. Harris, if you're going to do something, it needs to be now." Ivy looked through the scope, searching the ridgelines of the Kravok Pass for targets. And there, movement on the western ridge. Enemy fighters moving into position, preparing to pour fire down onto the trapped Rangers below. "I've got targets," she said quietly. "Danny, confirm." Wade adjusted his scope. Confirmed. Western Ridge, approximately 20 hostiles in view. Range 3150 meters. Ivy's finger found the trigger. Her heartbeat slowed, the way it always did in these moments. The world narrowed to the reticle, the target, in the space between. Wind shift, Wade murmured. 9 clicks, steady now. She made the adjustment, breathing out slowly. This was it. The shot that would either save 17 lives or accomplish nothing at all. Send it, Wade whispered. Ivy squeezed the trigger. The Chaytak bucked against Ivy's shoulder with a thunderous crack that echoed across the ridge. For 3 full seconds, an eternity, nothing happened. The bullet traveled through the air, fighting gravity and wind, following the arc of physics and prayer. Then, through the scope, Ivy saw one of the enemy fighters on the distant ridge suddenly crumple and fall. Hit, Wade breathed, disbelief and excitement mingling in his voice. Holy hell, that's a hit. But there was no time to celebrate. Ivy was already working the bolt, chambering another round. The other fighters on the ridge had frozen, confused. They knew someone had been hit, but the sound of the shot wouldn't reach them for another 2 seconds. They had no idea where it came from. Second target, you're 11 o'clock from first, Wade called. Adjusting for wind shift, 10 clicks now, gusting to 12. Ivy made the correction and fired again. The ritual became automatic: shoot, observe, chamber, acquire, adjust, shoot again. Each shot was a complex equation solved in seconds, each hit a minor miracle multiplied. I in the operations center back at base, Captain Reeves and Lieutenant Garcia watched the tactical display with mounting astonishment. The enemy markers on the western ridge were disappearing one by one. What is she doing? Someone whispered. The impossible, Garcia replied. On the ground in the Kravok Pass, Staff Sergeant Brightman pressed a hand against the wound in his side and tried to make sense of what was happening. The enemy fire that had been relentless moments ago was suddenly sporadic, confused. Through the chaos and pain, he heard one of his rangers shout, "Their shooters are going down. Someone's taking them out." "Where's it coming from?" Brightman demanded. "I don't know, Sarge. It's like they're just dropping." Back at the observation post, Ivy shifted her aim to the eastern ridge. More targets, more calculations. Sweat ran down her face despite the cool air. Her shoulder ached from the recoil, but she pushed the pain away. There was only the scope, the trigger, and the men dying in the valley below. "Eastern ridge clear," Wade reported. "Alpha Company is moving. They're trying to push toward the rally point." But the enemy wasn't finished. Reinforcements were moving into position, and these were smarter. They'd figured out the shots were coming from long range and were using cover better. Ivy could see them setting up a heavy machine gun position that would cut off Alpha Company's escape route. "Gun team, you're 2 o'clock, behind that rock formation," Wade called. Range 3280 meters. Wind picking up, 15 clicks, gusty. This was harder. The targets were partially concealed, and the increased wind made every shot less certain. Ivy studied the position, breathing steadily. She needed to disable that gun, but the crew was smart enough to stay behind cover between movements. She waited, finger resting lightly on the trigger. Patience was as important as skill. One of the gun crew leaned out to adjust the weapon, just for a second, maybe 2. Ivy fired, the fighter fell. The others immediately pulled back, abandoning the gun position. Without the heavy weapon, Alpha Company had a chance. "They're running," Wade said, amazement in his voice. "The enemy is actually pulling back." Through her scope, Ivy could see the enemy forces retreating from their positions, dragging their wounded, their tactical advantage evaporating under fire they couldn't locate or return. And in the riverbed below, Alpha Company was moving, wounded supported by their comrades, weapons ready, seizing the moment they'd been given. Garcia's voice crackled over the radio, "Harris, Alpha Company is mobile. They're heading for the extraction point. Air support will be on station in 15 minutes. Ivy didn't respond immediately. She was tracking the retreating enemy forces, making sure they didn't rally and counterattack. Her ammunition was running low, she'd fired 32 rounds, and each one had mattered. "How many hits?" she asked Wade quietly. He checked his tally marks. Confirmed hits, 23. Possible hits, 6 more. "You just broke up an ambush from 3 kilometers away, Ivy." That's not supposed to be possible." In the valley, Brightman got his first clear view of the situation as they reached higher ground. The enemy positions that had seemed impregnable were abandoned, littered with casualties from fire that had come from seemingly nowhere. He keyed his radio with shaking hands. "Kodiak Base, this is Alpha Actual. We're clear of the kill zone. Casualties are stable. I don't know who provided Overwatch, but they just saved 17 lives." At the operations center, Reeves closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, he looked directly at Garcia. "Tell Harris mission accomplished. And tell her." He paused, searching for words. "Tell her well done." Back at the observation post, Ivy finally allowed herself to lower the rifle. Her hands were steady, but she could feel the tremor waiting just beneath the surface, the adrenaline crash that would come soon. She'd disobeyed doctrine, violated engagement protocols, and taken shots that no reasonable commander would have authorized, and she'd do it all again in a heartbeat. "We should move," Wade said. "Get back to base before they court-martial me?" Ivy managed a tired smile. "Yeah, probably." But as they packed up the equipment and prepared to leave, both of them knew that something had changed. Not just the outcome of one mission, but something fundamental about what was possible when courage and skill collided with impossible odds. The sunny day continued, indifferent to miracles. The drive back to Firebase Kodiak was quiet, both Ivy and Wade lost in their own thoughts. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion and the growing awareness of what Ivy had actually done. She'd disobeyed standing orders, taken unauthorized action, and fired nearly 40 rounds of specialized ammunition without proper clearance. By any military standard, she should be facing serious consequences. But she'd also saved 17 lives. The base came into view as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. Something was different, Ivy noticed it immediately. Personnel had gathered near the main gate, more than usual for a routine return. As their vehicle approached, she realized they were waiting for her. "Oh hell," Wade muttered. "This is either really good or really bad." The vehicle rolled through the gate, and Ivy saw Captain Reeves standing at the front of the assembly with Lieutenant Garcia beside him. Behind them, dozens of soldiers lined both sides of the entrance. As Ivy and Wade climbed out of the vehicle, something unexpected happened. The soldiers began to applaud. It started with one person, then spread like wildfire. Within seconds, the entire assembly was clapping, and some were even cheering. Ivy stood frozen, the chatak still in her hands, completely unprepared for this response. "What do I do?" she whispered to Wade. "Accept it," he replied, grinning. "You earned it." Reeves approached, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Ivy was certain he was going to place her under arrest. Instead, he extended his hand. "Harris," he said formally, "that was the finest display of marksmanship I've seen in 23 years of service. And more importantly, it was the right call when command made the wrong one." Ivy shook his hand, still processing. "Sir, I disobeyed." "You saved 17 soldiers that I had written off as dead," Reeves interrupted, his voice low enough that only she and Garcia could hear. "You did what I should have authorized from the start. There'll be an after-action review, and there'll be questions from higher up, but as far as I'm concerned, you're a hero." "Not a problem." Before Ivy could respond, there was a commotion at the medical facility. Alpha Company had arrived by helicopter, and the wounded were being rushed into treatment. But Brightman, despite the medics' protests, was walking toward the gate. His uniform was torn and blood-stained, his face pale from blood loss, but his eyes were clear and determined. He spotted Ivy and changed direction. "You're Harris?" he asked, stopping in front of her. "Yes, Sergeant." Brightman looked at her for a long moment, then slowly raised his hand in a salute. My Rangers and I owe you our lives. Thank you doesn't even begin to cover it. Ivy returned the salute, her throat tight. Just doing my job, Sergeant. No, Brightman said firmly. You did a hell of a lot more than that. He glanced at the Chatak she was still holding. 3,000 meters plus. How many shots? 32 fired. 23 confirmed hits. Brightman shook his head in disbelief. 23. Sweet mercy. He swayed slightly, and a medic immediately grabbed his arm. All right, I'm coming. But Harris, he looked back at her. Next time we roll out, I want you on overwatch. Official request from Alpha Company. As the medics led him away, Garcia turned to Ivy with a slight smile. Looks like you're not going to be stuck on perimeter duty anymore. The reality of it was starting to sink in. Ivy had proven something today, not just to command, but to herself. She'd trusted her instincts, taken the shot that others said was impossible, and succeeded when failure would have meant watching 17 soldiers die. That evening, Ivy sat alone in the armory, cleaning the Chatak with the same meticulous care she gave all her weapons. The celebration had been overwhelming, soldiers wanting to shake her hand, buy her drinks, hear the story. She'd escaped as soon as possible, needing quiet to process everything. Mind if I join you? Yuki appeared in the doorway, carrying 2 cups of the base's terrible coffee. Please. Ivy accepted the coffee gratefully. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the only sound the soft click of cleaning tools on metal. Finally, Yuki spoke. You know everyone's going to be talking about this for months. You're famous now. I didn't do it to be famous. I did it because it was right. I know. That's what makes it matter. Yuki paused. Can I ask you something? When Reeves said no initially, when he said they were too far gone to save, what made you push back? Most people would have accepted that. Ivy set down her cleaning rod, considering the question. My brother, she said finally. He died because people with power decided his life wasn't worth the risk to save. I swore I'd never be that person. I'd never write someone off because the odds weren't good enough. So you gambled 17 lives on an impossible shot. No. I gambled my career on a difficult shot. There's a difference. Yuki smiled. Yeah. I guess there is. 3 days later, the full weight of what Ivy had done began to ripple outward in ways she never anticipated. The after-action report had been filed, and as Reeves predicted, questions came from higher command. But something else came too, attention from military leadership, media inquiries, and most significantly, a formal investigation into why Alpha Company had been sent into a known danger zone without adequate support. Ivy was called to a video conference with Colonel Hartmann, the regional commander. She stood at attention in front of the screen, Wade beside her as her official spotter. Hartmann was a veteran with silver hair and eyes that had seen too many wars. He studied them both for a long moment before speaking. Corporal Harris, Corporal Wade. I've read the after-action reports. All of them. He leaned forward. What you did was tactically brilliant and operationally insubordinate. Under normal circumstances, I'd have you both brought up on charges for unauthorized engagement. Ivy's stomach dropped, but she kept her expression neutral. Yes, sir. However, Hartmann continued, these are not normal circumstances. The intelligence that sent Alpha Company into that pass was flawed. We now know the ambush was specifically planned to draw out a rapid response force. If you hadn't acted, we would have lost 17 soldiers and potentially sent more into the same trap when we attempted rescue. He paused. You saw what trained officers missed. You made the call that saved lives. That matters. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. The media has gotten hold of this story. They're calling you the Angel of Kravok Pass and other dramatic nonsense. Some politicians want to give you a medal. Others want to use this to criticize military oversight. You're about to become a symbol, Harris, whether you want to be or not. The words settled over Ivy like a heavy blanket. A symbol. That wasn't what she wanted. She just wanted to do her job and keep soldiers safe. With respect, sir, I'm not interested in being a symbol. I'm interested in being a soldier. Hartman's stern expression softened slightly. I know. That's why I'm giving you a choice. You can accept the commendation, do the publicity circuit, become the face of precision marksmanship for the European Expeditionary Force. It'll be good for recruitment, good for morale, good for your career. He paused. Or you can refuse the spotlight, stay in the field, and continue doing what you do best, being the sniper that command should have been using all along. It wasn't really a choice at all, and they both knew it. I'll stay in the field, sir. I thought you'd say that. Hartman almost smiled. Very well. Effective immediately, you're assigned as primary sniper for all high-risk operations in this sector. Captain Reeves will integrate you into planning from the start. No more sitting on the sidelines. After the call ended, Wade let out a long breath. You could have been famous. Medals, interviews, the whole thing. I could have been miserable, Ivy corrected. She looked out the window at the firebase, at the soldiers going about their duties. This is where I belong. Not in front of cameras. The next morning, Ivy was summoned to the medical facility. She found Alpha Company's rangers in various states of recovery, some in beds, others sitting in chairs, all bearing the marks of their ordeal. They'd asked to see her together. Brightman, his torso wrapped in bandages but his color improved, stood as she entered. There she is. The woman who can't take a compliment. I heard you turned down the medal, another ranger added. That true? It wasn't about medals, Ivy replied simply. No, it was about us. Brightman gestured to his men. Look, Harris, command can give you whatever assignment they want, write whatever reports make them feel better. But these rangers? We remember. We know who had our backs when no one else did. He held out a patch, Alpha Company's unit insignia. You're one of us now. Honorary Ranger. We don't give these out lightly. Ivy took the patch, emotions threatening to overwhelm her careful composure. These men had been through hell and survived because she'd refused to accept the unacceptable. And now they were offering her the highest honor they could give, acceptance as one of their own. I don't know what to say, she managed. Say you'll do it again if you have to, one of the wounded rangers called from his bed. Say you'll keep being the guardian angel who shows up when the odds are impossible. Ivy looked at each of them, these soldiers who'd survived because someone finally listened to the voice that said they mattered more than tactical doctrine. She thought about her brother, about the promise she'd made to herself, about the sniper rifle waiting in the armory for the next time someone needed the impossible. I will, she said firmly. Every single time. As she left the medical facility, patch in hand, Ivy felt something shift in her chest. She'd spent 3 years trying to prove herself worthy, trying to earn the trust and respect of command. But she'd been looking in the wrong direction. The soldiers in the field, the ones taking the risks and facing the dangers, they were the ones who mattered. They were the ones who understood what she'd always known, sometimes the rules have to break so that good people can survive. That evening, she sewed the Alpha Company patch onto her tactical vest, right next to her own unit insignia. Wade watched from his bunk, grinning. You know what this means, right? They're going to expect miracles from you now. Ivy threaded the needle through fabric, securing the patch firmly. Then I guess I'd better keep delivering them. 2 weeks after the Kravok Pass incident, Ivy found herself in a position she'd never imagined, sitting at the planning table during mission briefings. Captain Reeves had made good on Colonel Hartman's directive, integrating her into tactical planning from the ground up. It was strange being in the room where decisions were made rather than simply being told what those decisions were. Harris, your assessment? Reeves asked, pulling her from her thoughts. They were reviewing intelligence on a suspected weapons cache in the mountains 40 kilometers north. The proposed operation called for a night insertion by a small team. Ivy studied the terrain maps, the satellite imagery, the approach vectors. Old habits kicked in. She saw the landscape not as a soldier on the ground would, but through the narrow focus of a scope. The approach is good, but the extraction concerns me, she said, pointing to the map. If the enemy responds faster than anticipated, the team will be moving through this valley in daylight. It's exposed. They'll need overwatch on these two ridges. She indicated the high ground flanking the valley. And here, this elevation would give covering fire for the final kilometer to the pickup zone. Lieutenant Garcia nodded approvingly. Positioning? I'll take the northern ridge. We'll need another marksman on the southern position, someone who can handle distance shots and has the patience to stay invisible for 8 hours. I know just the person, Reeves said. Corporal Lane. He's been asking to work with you since Kravok Pass. After the briefing, Ivy headed to the range to zero her rifle for the upcoming operation. She found it already occupied, a young soldier, maybe 20, practicing with a standard-issue rifle. He was good, clustering shots tight even at 500 meters, but his breathing pattern was off, causing slight variations in his point of impact. Mind if I make a suggestion? Ivy called out. The soldier turned, and his eyes widened with recognition. Corporal Harris. I mean, yes, ma'am, he fumbled with the rifle, nearly dropping it. Ivy suppressed a smile. This was still new, being recognized, being treated like someone important. Relax. I'm not an officer, and I don't bite. What's your name? Private Private Thomas Garrett, ma'am. Okay, Thomas. You're a good shot, but you're rushing your breath. Watch. She demonstrated the proper breathing technique, the slow exhale, the natural pause where the body stills, the squeeze of the trigger in that moment of perfect calm. Try it. Garrett followed her instruction, and his next shot hit dead center. His face lit up with excitement. That's incredible. How did you? He stopped, embarrassed. Sorry. You must get tired of questions. Actually, I don't mind. Ivy realized it was true. Teaching someone felt purposeful in a different way than mission work. You interested in precision shooting? Very much. I've been trying to qualify for marksman training, but... He trailed off, looking uncertain. But what? I didn't think I was good enough. People like you, who can make impossible shots, that's natural talent, right? Ivy laughed, surprising herself. Thomas, the shot at Kravok Pass was 32 rounds to get 23 hits. That's a 72% success rate. Good, yes. Miraculous? No. It was thousands of hours of practice, understanding ballistics, reading weather, and refusing to give up when the calculations got hard. She paused. Talent opens doors. Discipline walks through them. Garrett absorbed this, nodding slowly. So I could actually do this? Be a real marksman? If you're willing to work for it. Ivy checked her watch. I've got an hour before my next briefing. Want to learn how to read wind? The hour turned into 2. Ivy found herself explaining the subtleties of long-range shooting, how temperature affected bullet trajectory, how to calculate for the Coriolis effect at extreme distances, how to read mirage patterns to judge wind at the target location. Garrett absorbed everything like a sponge, asking intelligent questions and making connections she didn't have to spell out. Wade found them as the sun was setting, both of them prone on the range, Garrett attempting a 1,000-meter shot under Ivy's guidance. Teaching now, are we? Wade asked, amused. Someone taught me once, Ivy replied. Figured I should pass it along. Garrett's shot hit just outside the target's center ring. Close, but not quite there. Again, Ivy instructed. You dropped your shoulder right before the trigger pull. Keep it steady. The next shot hit center mass. Yes. Garrett pumped his fist, then immediately looked embarrassed by his enthusiasm. Don't apologize for celebrating improvement, Ivy told him. That's how you know you're growing. She stood, brushing off dust. Same time tomorrow? We'll work on shooting from uncomfortable positions. Really? You'd do that? Really? But Thomas, she waited until he looked at her. This only works if you put in the hours when I'm not here. Practice the fundamentals. Study ballistics. Become obsessed with understanding why the bullet does what it does. I will. I promise. Garrett's earnestness reminded Ivy of herself 3 years ago, raw, determined, desperate to prove that grief could be transformed into purpose. As she and Wade walked back toward the barracks, Wade said quietly, "You're good at that. Teaching. It's different from shooting. But it feels important. It is important. You're not just making shots anymore, Ivy. You're making shooters." Wade paused. The Kravach pass thing, it made you a hero to a lot of people. But this might matter more in the long run. Ivy considered that as the evening settled over Firebase Kodiak. The upcoming operation would test her again, demand precision and nerve under conditions that might be even more challenging than Kravach Pass. But knowing that she was also building something beyond herself, passing on knowledge, creating a legacy of skill rather than just legend, that added a new dimension to her purpose. The guardian angel, teaching others to grow wings. The mission launched at 0200 hours under a moonless sky. Ivy and Corporal James Lane moved through the darkness like ghosts, each carrying 50 pounds of equipment toward their respective observation posts. Lane was exactly who Reeves had promised, quiet, competent, with a reputation for patience that matched Ivy's own. They'd spent 2 days planning, coordinating fields of fire, establishing communication protocols. "Split here," Lane whispered at the fork in the trail. "Stay safe up there, Harris. You too. Remember. Wait for your signal before engaging." "I know." Even in the darkness, she could hear his smile. "I've been doing this almost as long as you've been alive. But I appreciate the concern." Ivy climbed alone to her position on the northern ridge. The terrain was brutal, loose rock, steep inclines, and no clear path. Perfect, in other words. No one would expect a sniper to position here, which meant no one would look for her. She reached her selected spot 90 minutes before the insertion team would begin their approach, giving her time to prepare. The hide was basic, camouflage netting, natural foliage, and a position that offered clear sight lines to the target area and extraction route. She settled the Chaytak into place, then began the ritual of reading the environment. Wind speed and direction, temperature gradients, humidity. Each data point fed into her mental calculations. "Harris, Lane, comms check," Garcia's voice crackled softly through her earpiece. "Harris, set and ready," she whispered. "Lane, position secure," came the response from the southern ridge. "Copy both. Insertion team is 30 minutes out. Hold position and observe." 30 minutes of absolute stillness. Ivy had learned this skill the hard way, the ability to become part of the landscape, to quiet not just her body but her mind. Her breathing slowed to the point where the camouflage netting barely moved. Through the scope, she watched the target compound, noting guard positions, patrol patterns, anything that might complicate the mission. The insertion team moved like professionals, for soldiers, low and fast, reaching the compound perimeter without triggering alarms. Through her scope, Ivy tracked their progress. The operation was smooth, almost textbook. They breached the cache location, began cataloging weapons. Everything according to plan. Then the plan fell apart. Headlights appeared on the access road, 3 vehicles moving fast toward the compound. Either a scheduled patrol arriving early or, worse, a response to an alarm the team hadn't detected. Either way, the insertion team was about to be trapped. "Contact imminent," Garcia's voice was tight. "Insertion team, expedite and prepare for hot extract." Ivy watched the vehicles approach. Math and instinct collided in her mind. If those vehicles reached the compound, they'd pin the team inside. But if she engaged now, she'd reveal her position and potentially draw fire before the team could evacuate. The choice balanced on a knife's edge. "Harris, Lane, you are cleared hot if targets present threat to team," Garcia authorized. The lead vehicle stopped at the compound gate. Soldiers disembarked. She counted 8, no, 10 hostiles. Armed, alert, moving with military precision. They were seconds from discovering the insertion team. Ivy's finger found the trigger. The first shot would be the announcement, after that, chaos. She picked her target, the squad leader, identifiable by his position and the way others deferred to him. Remove the leader, create confusion. She fired. The .408 caliber round crossed 1,800 meters in under 3 seconds. The squad leader dropped. Before his soldiers could process what happened, Ivy was already firing again. The second vehicle's driver. Then a soldier reaching for his radio. Southern targets, Lane's calm voice reported. He'd engaged simultaneously, covering the opposite approach. The hostile forces scattered, seeking cover, returning fire in random directions. They didn't know where the shots originated, the distance and suppression made it impossible to locate. Which was exactly the point. Insertion team is mobile, Garcia reported. They're heading for primary extraction point. Ivy tracked the team's movement while maintaining pressure on the hostile forces. Every few seconds, another carefully placed shot kept the enemy pinned, unable to organize pursuit. She was burning through ammunition, but each round bought precious seconds for the team below. Harris, vehicle approaching your position from the east, Lane warned. Ivy swung her scope. A technical, a pickup truck with a mounted machine gun, was racing along the ridge road toward her location. Someone had been smart enough to triangulate her shots. The technical would reach her position in less than 2 minutes. I see it. Engaging. The truck was moving fast over rough terrain, a difficult target. She led it, calculating speed and trajectory. Her first shot missed, kicking up dirt 20 meters ahead. The truck swerved but kept coming. Second shot, she adjusted for the vehicle's evasive movement, and the driver slumped forward. The truck veered wildly, then rolled as it left the road, tumbling down the slope in a cascade of metal and dust. Threat neutralized, she reported, already scanning for new targets. Insertion team at extraction point, Garcia announced. Air support inbound, 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Ivy focused on keeping the hostile forces suppressed, preventing them from organizing an effective pursuit. She could hear Lane doing the same from his position, a steady rhythm of precision fire that created a corridor of safety for the team below. Then she heard it, the beautiful sound of helicopter rotors. The extraction bird swooped in fast and low, and within seconds the insertion team was aboard and climbing away. Mission successful. All call signs, collapse and extract, Garcia ordered. Harris, Lane, get clear. Ivy broke down her position with practiced speed, policing her brass and packing essential gear. The rest, camouflage and disposable equipment, she left behind. Every second counted now. The hostile forces knew approximately where she'd been, they'd be coming. She moved down the ridge at a controlled run, using terrain and darkness for cover. Her extraction point was a rally point 2 kilometers south, where Wade waited with a vehicle. The weight of her equipment seemed to double with each step, but she pushed through the fatigue. Behind her, she could hear shouts and vehicle engines, pursuit. Harris, Lane, status? Garcia asked. Harris, clear and moving, she gasped between breaths. Lane, encountering resistance. May need support. Ivy's blood ran cold. Lane was in trouble. Ivy reached the rally point to find Wade already behind the wheel, engine running. But instead of climbing in, she moved to the passenger side and grabbed the radio. Lane, what's your situation? Pinned down about 400 meters from my extraction point, Lane's voice was steady but strained. At least 6 hostiles between me and the vehicle. I can hold them, but I can't move. Wade looked at Ivy, reading her expression. We're not leaving him. Hell no, we're not. Ivy studied the tactical map. Lane's position was 3 kilometers northwest, not far, but the terrain between was exposed. Going in hot would be suicide. But maybe they didn't need to go in. Maybe they just needed to give Lane an opening. Wade, can you get us to this elevation? She pointed to a ridge overlooking Lane's position. It'll be rough, but yeah. Do it. Garcia, we're moving to support Lane. Harris, your orders are to extract, Garcia responded. Respectfully, sir, new orders, we're not leaving anyone behind. She didn't wait for approval. Let's move, Danny. The vehicle bounced over terrain that barely qualified as a road, every jolt threatening to send them careening into darkness. Ivy braced herself against the roll bar, already running calculations. Distance, elevation, visibility in darkness. Everything was suboptimal, but when had that ever stopped her? They reached the overlook in 4 minutes that felt like 40. Ivy was out before the vehicle fully stopped, the Chaytak already coming to her shoulder. Through the scope, she could see muzzle flashes, Lane's position under sustained fire. The hostiles had him triangulated, moving to flank. Lane, help is here. When you hear my shot, move fast toward the extraction point. Don't stop, don't look back. Copy. Standing by. Ivy identified the hostile positions by their muzzle flashes. 6 targets, spread across 200 meters of terrain. At night, without thermal optics, this was guesswork elevated to an art form. She'd have to trust her instincts, her experience, and no small amount of luck. The first hostile was the easiest, he'd exposed himself too much, overconfident in the darkness. Ivy's shot caught him center mass. Before the others could react, she was tracking to the second target. In night shooting, speed mattered as much as accuracy. Once the enemy knew they were under fire, they'd go to ground. She fired rapidly, 5 shots in 12 seconds. Not all hit, but enough did. The hostile fire faltered, confused, seeking this new threat. In that moment of chaos, Lane moved. Moving, he called. Ivy provided covering fire, shots placed to suppress rather than necessarily hit. Keep the enemy's heads down, force them to choose between returning fire and seeking cover. Wade, beside her, had opened up with his rifle, adding to the volume if not the precision. Harris, I'm clear. Lane's voice carried relief and exhaustion. I'm at the vehicle. Copy. We're Oscar Mike. Ivy and Wade pulled back, sprinting for their own vehicle. Behind them, the hostile fire resumed, but they were already moving, racing down the slope toward the main extraction route. 20 minutes later, they were back inside the wire at Firebase Kodiak. Lane was waiting at the gate, and when Ivy stepped out, he grabbed her in a bear hug that lifted her off her feet. You crazy, beautiful, insane woman, he said, setting her down. You didn't have to come back. Yeah, we did. Ivy smiled tiredly. That's what we do now. Nobody gets left behind. Captain Reeves appeared, his expression somewhere between impressed and exasperated. Harris, you directly disobeyed extraction orders. Yes, sir, I did. To save Corporal Lane. Yes, sir. Reeves studied her for a long moment, then shook his head with something that might have been admiration. You're making a habit of this. The after-action report is going to be interesting. He paused. Good work. Both of you. As the team debriefed, the successful elements of the mission became clear. The weapons cache had been documented, the intelligence gathered. And despite the complications, everyone had come home. The mission was being classified as a complete success. But for Ivy, success meant something different than it once had. It wasn't about the shot count or the commendations. It was about the fact that Lane was standing beside her, exhausted but alive. That the insertion team had extracted safely. That nobody's family would be getting a devastating phone call. Later that night, unable to sleep, Ivy found herself back at the range. The facility was empty, just her and the night and the familiar weight of her rifle. She set up at the 1,000-meter line and began the meditation of precision shooting, not to practice, but to think. Private Garrett appeared after an hour, hesitant but drawn by the sound of shots. Couldn't sleep either? Ivy asked. I heard about the mission. About what you did. He sat beside her. Does it ever get easier? The choice to put yourself at risk? No. It gets more complicated. Ivy chambered another round. You start understanding how much is at stake. Not just the mission, but the people. They become real to you, not just soldiers, but someone's brother, someone's friend. She took the shot, watched it hit center mass. And you realize you'd do anything to make sure they get home. Even if it costs you? Especially if it costs me. Ivy lowered the rifle, looking at the young soldier. That's the difference between being a good shot and being a guardian. A good shot hits the target. A guardian decides which targets matter. Garrett was quiet for a moment, processing. I want to be a guardian. Then keep showing up. Keep learning. Keep caring more about the people beside you than the glory in front of you. She handed him the rifle. Your turn. Show me what you've learned. As Garrett settled into position, Ivy felt something settle in her own chest. The path she was on had changed from what she'd imagined when she first picked up a rifle. She wasn't just avenging her brother anymore, wasn't just proving herself worthy. She was building something, a legacy of skill, yes, but more importantly, a legacy of values. The certainty that no one deserved to be abandoned. That impossible situations just required impossible courage. 3 months after the Kravach Pass incident, Ivy was called to Colonel Hartmann's office. It wasn't a video conference this time, he'd flown in personally, which suggested something significant was happening. She reported in proper uniform, trying not to speculate about the purpose of the meeting. Hartmann wasn't alone. Beside him sat a woman in civilian clothes with sharp eyes and an air of authority that suggested intelligence services. The colonel gestured to a chair. Corporal Harris, this is Director Calloway from Strategic Operations. She has a proposition for you. Calloway studied Ivy with the assessing gaze of someone who made decisions about people's lives. Corporal, your actions over the past 3 months have attracted attention at the highest levels. The Kravach Pass rescue, the weapons cache operation, and several other incidents that officially never happened, you've demonstrated capabilities we need. What kind of capabilities, ma'am? The ability to make impossible shots. More importantly, the judgment to know when to take them. Calloway leaned forward. We're forming a specialized unit, elite marksmen and women who can provide precision support for high-risk operations. Technically, it doesn't exist. Operationally, it would be deployed wherever conventional forces face situations like Kravach Pass. Ivy's mind raced through the implications. You want me to join a ghost unit? I want you to lead one, Calloway corrected. You'd have authority to select and train your own team. Operate with significant autonomy. Take the missions that regular command structure isn't equipped to authorize. It was an incredible opportunity, the chance to build exactly the kind of capability that could prevent future Kravach Pass situations. But something in Ivy hesitated. Can I ask a question, ma'am? Of course. This unit, would it operate in the shadows? No recognition, no official record? That's the nature of strategic operations, Corporal. Ivy looked at Colonel Hartmann, then back to Calloway. With respect, ma'am, I appreciate the offer. But I need to decline. Both officers looked surprised. Calloway recovered first. May I ask why? This is the kind of opportunity most soldiers would. Most soldiers aren't me, ma'am. Ivy chose her words carefully. The reason Kravach Pass worked wasn't because I'm special. It's because the soldiers on the ground knew someone had their back. They saw that impossible doesn't mean abandoned. She paused. If I disappear into a unit that officially doesn't exist, that message disappears too. You'd rather stay here? At a forward base, with standard operations? I'd rather stay where soldiers can see me. Where I can teach people like Private Garrett that precision isn't magic, it's discipline and care. Where my presence reminds command that creative solutions exist if they're willing to trust their people. Ivy met Calloway's gaze steadily. The shadow work is important, ma'am. But so is the visible example. Hartmann was nodding slowly, understanding dawning in his expression. She's right, Director. Harris has become something more valuable than a ghost operator. She's become a standard, proof that doctrine should serve soldiers, not the other way around. Calloway considered this, her expression unreadable. Finally, she smiled. You're an unusual soldier, Corporal Harris. Most people would jump at advancement. I'm not interested in advancement, ma'am. I'm interested in making sure no one else watches 17 people die because procedure says they're already gone. Fair enough. Calloway stood, extending her hand. The offer remains open if you change your mind. But I respect your decision. After she left, Hartman gestured for Ivy to remain seated. That took courage. Turning down that kind of opportunity. It didn't feel like courage, sir. It felt like the right choice. They're often the same thing. Hartman pulled out a folder. Since you're staying in regular operations, I have different news. You're being promoted to sergeant and assigned as senior marksmanship instructor for the sector. You'll continue field operations, but you'll also be responsible for training the next generation of precision shooters. Ivy felt something warm spread through her chest. This was what mattered, not glory or shadows, but the chance to multiply her impact through others. Thank you, sir. I won't let you down. You haven't yet. That evening, Ivy found Wade, Lane, and Garrett at the rec room, celebrating. Word of her promotion had spread fast. To Sergeant Harris, Wade raised his terrible coffee in a toast. The woman who shoots straight and stands firm. To teaching us how to do the same, Garrett added, grinning. They drank, and Ivy felt the weight of responsibility settle comfortably on her shoulders. She'd turned down the chance to be a legend in the shadows. Instead, she'd chosen to be a guardian in the light, visible, accountable, present. The path forward was clear now. She'd train soldiers to see what she saw, that every life mattered enough to risk everything. She'd keep taking the impossible shots when they presented themselves. And she'd ensure that the lesson of Kravok Pass lived beyond one sunny day when 17 soldiers survived because someone refused to accept that they were already dead. Outside, the stars emerged over Firebase Kodiak, indifferent and eternal. But inside the wire, something had changed. A new standard had been set. A new example established. And in a world where impossible was just another word for difficult, that made all the difference. The hostage location was a compound built into a hillside, 3 buildings, high walls, and an estimated 20 hostels holding 14 civilians, including 5 children. The rescue team was the best they had, but success depended entirely on Ivy neutralizing the guards without alerting the compound before the team could breach. She positioned herself on a ridge 2,100 meters from the target, the Chaitak steady on its bipod. Beside her, Wade handled spotting duties, his voice calm as he called conditions. The morning sun was just breaking the horizon, the golden hour when light played tricks but also revealed details darkness hid. Range, 2100 meters. Wind, variable, 4 to 8 clicks. Temperature, rising. Hostiles visible, 7 external guards, unknown internal. Through the scope, Ivy could see the compound courtyard where 2 guards stood near a building she knew held the hostages. One mistake, one early shot that gave away the assault, and those hostages would become casualties. Her breathing slowed, entering that state of absolute focus where the world narrowed to physics and purpose. Rescue team is in position, Garcia's voice came through the radio. Harris, you have the green light. Take your shots when ready. The plan was simple and terrifying. Ivy would eliminate the external guards in rapid succession, creating a window of exactly 45 seconds where the compound appeared normal but was actually blind. In that window, the rescue team would breach and secure the hostages before internal guards realized what was happening. 7 guards. 45 seconds. 0 room for error. Ivy identified her sequence, starting with the guard nearest the alarm system, moving through positions that would prevent any from reaching cover or communication. Her finger rested on the trigger, mind calculating the minute adjustments needed between shots. Send it, Wade whispered. The first shot. The guard by the alarm dropped silently. For seconds to chamber, acquire the next target, adjust for wind shift. Second shot, the guard at the main gate. The others hadn't noticed yet, still following their patrol patterns. Third shot, fourth, fifth. The choreography of precision, each movement practiced 10,000 times until it was instinct. The sixth guard was reaching for his radio when Ivy's bullet found him. One more, the seventh, turning toward his fallen comrades, confusion becoming alarm. Ivy's final shot caught him mid-turn. All external guards down, she reported, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Compound is blind. Execute, execute, execute. The rescue team moved like lightning. Through her scope, Ivy watched them flow into the compound, breaching the hostage building with practiced efficiency. She kept her rifle trained on the remaining buildings, ready to engage any threat that emerged. Contact inside, Garcia reported. Rescue team engaging. The seconds stretched like hours. Then, hostages secured. All 14 civilians safe. 3 hostile casualties internal, remainder surrendering. Ivy's breath released in a long, shuddering exhale. Wade's hand found her shoulder, squeezing once. 7 for 7, he said quietly. When it mattered most. The extraction was clean, professional. By the time Ivy returned to Firebase Kodiak, the hostages were receiving medical attention and the rescue team was debriefing. But she didn't join them immediately. Instead, she found a quiet corner and let the weight of what had almost gone wrong wash over her. 7 shots. 14 lives. The math was simple, but the responsibility was crushing. Captain Reeves found her there an hour later. The parents wanted me to thank you. I told them you were just doing your job, but they insisted. He held out a child's drawing, stick figures with a tall figure holding a rifle, surrounded by hearts. At the top, in careful letters, "Thank you for saving my mommy." Ivy took the drawing with trembling hands, and something inside her finally broke open. Not despair, but release, all the pressure, all the fear, all the determination that had driven her since her brother died. She'd carried it for so long that she'd forgotten it was a burden. Now, looking at that simple drawing, she remembered why it mattered. "They're calling you a hero again," Reeves said gently. "The legend grows." "I'm not a legend, sir. I'm just a soldier who refuses to accept unnecessary loss." "That's exactly what makes you one." 3 days later, Ivy stood before her advanced class again, teaching them the lessons of the hostage rescue. Not just the technical aspects, the wind reading, the rapid target acquisition, but the weight of responsibility that came with being the last line between danger and innocent lives. "You'll face impossible situations," she told them. "Moments where doctrine says one thing and your conscience says another. When that happens, remember this: we don't serve doctrine. We serve the people doctrine is supposed to protect. And if those two things ever conflict, choose the people. Every single time." Private Garrett raised his hand. "Even if it costs us?" "Especially if it costs us. Because that's the choice that defines who we are, not as shooters, but as guardians." That evening, as the sun set over Firebase Kodiak, Ivy sat with Wade, Lane, and her growing circle of marksmen and women who'd embraced the standard she'd set. They weren't just soldiers anymore, they were a community bound by the understanding that some things mattered more than orders, more than careers, more than safety. "You know what the best part is?" Wade said, watching the new graduates practice on the range. "You didn't just save 17 Rangers that day at Kravok Pass. You saved the idea that it was possible to save them. That's the real legacy." Ivy watched her students, guardians in training, each one learning to see the world through a scope that revealed not just targets, but people worth protecting. The young woman who'd walked into a recruitment office with tears and fury had become something she never imagined, not just a soldier, but a standard. Not just a marksman, but a reminder that courage meant choosing compassion over compliance when lives hung in the balance. The guardian angel of Firebase Kodiak, teaching others to grow wings. And somewhere, across the valleys and ridges of this endless war, soldiers took comfort in knowing that when the impossible became necessary, there were people like Ivy Harris who would spit on orders, shoulder their rifles, and refuse to let anyone be abandoned. That was the legend. But more importantly, it was the truth. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.